What if the problem isn't you? What if you're in the wrong room? My suspicion? You're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You have outgrown where you are. Let's get more space and freedom to redesign the life you deserve. Welcome to the Reinvention Room. I'm Allison Hare, coach for ambitious women making big changes, and we are rethinking everything we've been taught. Part pop culture, part real talk, and all smarter ways to live life on your own terms. Okay, we are here with Kelli Thompson. She is the author of Closing the Confidence Gap, leadership and executive coach, and about to release a TED Talk. Welcome, Kelli. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. I'm looking forward to this.
So I really appreciate that you have a very unique flavor around confidence and pedestals and that I had never heard before. Mm-hmm. So I hunted you down as if I saw Taylor Swift somewhere and needed to get an autograph. What I was interested to know, what is it that did you notice out in the world that made you hang your hat on this particular topic of where you felt like you could contribute the most? What did you notice where you realized there is a gap that I think I can fill here?
Yeah. I wouldn't tell you that it was like this, blinding flash of light, like when you go to the Eras Tour concert for the first time, speaking of, if we're talking Swifties, right? You sit in there and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it comes to you all at once. It wasn't like that at all. In fact, I remember, I'll just kind of talk about the basis of my TED Talk and a little more about me is I'm a corporate veteran. So I will never forget that moment. And I didn't really give it much credence at the time, I guess. But I always just kind of remembered that there was this one day in corporate America where I had been at this company. I was there 12 total years. And this was year 11. So I was no spring chicken there. Okay. And we were sitting in one of those all-day strategy meetings sometimes you get thrown into. And, it was after lunch and you have that after lunch drag. And I'm just annoyed. I'm over it. So we get a bathroom break and, I go into the bathroom and I'm just like, oh my God, why am I so annoyed? And I just started to think, I'm like, well, because we're just hearing from the same people over and over and over again. The conversation is just going in circles. We've all been there, right? Where you're like, if I hear that guy say that thing one more time, And I was like, oh, well, all the voices we're hearing from are male voices, which, I worked in a male-dominated field of financial services. And so I thought to myself, well, are there more men than women in this room today? And there weren't. The senior leaders were men, but the room was even. So I was like, these women should speak up around here. And I will never forget, because it was like those bathroom walls said to me, they're like, well, you could be the one to speak up. And
Wow.
I was appalled at this. I was like, I can't speak up. Because these people are smarter than me. They have higher titles than me. They've been around longer than me. What if I speak up and I sound silly? And it was the first time I really started to notice that I had all these nerves kind of jump in my throat when I thought about being more vocal, but who would listen to what I have to say? And so looking back, I say I wish I would have had this epiphany, in that bathroom stall. And I walked back in and my life was forever changed. And I said all the things, but it wasn't like that at all. I just woke up to the fact that it was I want to say some things and I want to articulate some ideas. I want to ask some questions, but something is keeping me silent. And part of that is not only the stories that I had in my head, but part of it was what I call the hippo in the room, which is the highest paid person's opinion. The highest paid person's opinion. I was like, yep, okay, I guess we better do it that way. And then my ideas and insights didn't matter. I didn't even have a name for it then. And honestly, the first time I even named it was when I was writing my book. So this would have been, I had this moment probably in 2011. Well, I was writing my book in 2021. So this is 10 years later. And I'm thinking back to the genesis of God, when did I just have that aha moment that I had stuff to say and I was too scared to say it. I didn't have the confidence to say it. I didn't have the, it's not that I didn't have the words, I just didn't have the confidence, because what would people think? What if I speak up and people finally know that I have no idea what I'm talking about or I'm plain wrong? And I was like, I just kept putting people on a pedestal. That's really what I was doing. And so then in the book, I kind of laughingly called it, I'm like, well, it's kind of like pedestal syndrome. It's not really imposter syndrome. It's pedestal syndrome. And it actually only has a short mention in the book. And so how we got to where we're at today was as I just started coaching more and more leaders, through the course of the book, as I was going and presenting at conferences, as I was, talking and training and teaching all these women, that was a thing that stuck with them. They're like, oh my gosh, I do that all the time. That section where you talk about putting someone on a pedestal, that is what's keeping me from speaking up, from articulating my ideas, from going for the job, from challenging people, from asking questions. And it was just that one concept that honestly was kind of an afterthought in my book that kind of just blossomed into like, well, crap, I still do it too. I just don't do it in corporate America. I just do it with like other authors and entrepreneurs out there in the world. And so I just started to realize this is a bigger thing that deserves a bigger conversation because it has so many legs. And that's what really kind of was the basis of then said, well, we should probably make this a TED Talk.
This is so powerful because the women that are typically in leadership and executive positions are not people that outwardly struggle with confidence. And so I'm wondering, what are some insidious ways that we may not even recognize of where we might give our power away, even though we may be showing up in a leadership role? What have you noticed through this work?
Yeah, I would say I've noticed three things. So the first thing is they may not recognize that this is a confidence related thing because they've totally disconnected to themselves. And what I mean by that, or disconnected from themselves is what I should say. They have disconnected from this kind of inner knowing, this inner intelligence, this little inner still small voice that says like, hey, Allison, you should ask that question. Hey, Allison, you should pursue this idea, right? It's not this like, urgent, fear-based thing. It's like, it's just that little nudging. Like I'm sure you've probably had in your career that just keeps telling you, Allison, Allison. It just whispers at you. Well, they're disconnected from that. And so I think sometimes they shut that down and they just go along to get along. We just go along with the conversation in the room. I would say this.
Along to get along. How much do you think we do that? Maybe not, I guess the risk is, are you going to be a contrarian? Are you going to play into the trope of being the the angry woman or the emotional woman or the bitch, How does all of that play? Like, give me an example of how this plays out where we can kind of recognize where we do this.
Okay, so there's two ways because I believe that this going along to get along it actually exists on a spectrum. So I have two types of clients. Now, I have clients who have always been called bossy, assertive, aggressive, and all those sorts of things. Now, you might think to yourself, these are the types of women that they're just going to speak up. They don't care. It's not that they don't care. It's just that they have like this a higher tolerance for conflict. Okay. Yeah. So they might speak it up in a room because they just have a higher tolerance for it, for discomfort, for conflict, because that's just literally who they are as a human being. However, because those women have been told their whole lives, and I've been told this, that I've been too direct, too assertive, too aggressive, et cetera, they actually have this inner talk track in their heads that actually silences ideas more than you think, because that talk track is constantly going on in their heads going, you know what, don't speak up again. You've already been speaking up. People aren't going to pay attention to you. You could be too assertive and you're trying to get along with this group, right? It's not like they're trying to go along to get along. They're like, stop being so assertive so that you get along with your group. But then you have the other end of the spectrum, right? Where you maybe have the more stereotypical, if you will, folks who are going along to getting along. And these truly might be folks who are really conflict averse. And that's normal, right? That's just their lens of life is, I just want to avoid conflict. I really want to focus on relationships. So you know what? If the folks in charge want to go this way, we're going to go this way. And they might silence all those ideas and intuitions, right? Those little nudges that they have. And so I see it happen on both ends of the spectrum, but for different reasons. And so I think that actually can just be a really great coaching question to ask yourself in the moment is, am I going along to getting along? And what is the cost of that for me?
You talk a bit about the advocacy model. Can you walk through what that looks like? Because I think you, again, have a little bit of a different approach. And I can't help but thinking, I mean, we are in a political season of how much we give our power away and how that's playing out on the political landscape in the US. Of they must know better. They have more money. They have more experience. They have been, they've gone to Ivy League schools. I don't know. I don't have as much power as I think I do. So from an advocacy perspective, how do we start to harness our own power and our own voice in a way that can allow us to advocate for ourselves and start to kind of break out of this model once we recognize where we might be silencing ourselves when we don't have to?
Exactly. So the advocacy model really helps with kind of step two of pulling someone off the pedestal. Because the second way to pull someone off the pedestal is to recognize that you need to reestablish equal connection with those people. Okay. Because when we don't see people as equals, that's when we underestimate ourselves and put others on the pedestal. And this is where the advocacy model can help. So I just want you to, if you're listening, I think this helps bring it to life. I just want you to think of maybe an email that you want to write that is going to suggest something like an idea, or maybe it's going to give some feedback. I want you to think about maybe a meeting you have on your calendar next week where you're like, I really need to raise my hand to, suggest this thing. Maybe you're writing a training program or a speech that you're going to give to a board or a conference. Okay, so I just want you to think about that in your mind as I walk you through this to make it really real. So the advocacy model is 3 overlapping circles. It's like an overlapping 3-circle Venn diagram. The top circle.
We love the Venn diagram.
We love us a Venn diagram. Top circle is authenticity. This is where I always have folks start. And so when I think about writing my book, there were a million leadership books out there. There's a million books for confidence for women, right? And so I had to start thinking about, and as you even think about the political landscape, I've actually had some clients in politics. You have to start thinking about, yes, there's all these other players out there. Yes, they might have Ivy League degrees. Yes, I might just be from Omaha, Nebraska. But you know what? Based on authenticity, what is this unique thing about me that only I can offer the world? What is this unique talent? What is this unique point of view? What is this unique skill set? And so as you think about sitting in the office, you have to think about, what is this unique perspective that only I can offer this meeting? Yes, the CEO of my company might be here, but you know what? Nobody talks to the customer like I do. Nobody understands the data like I do. And that's that unique thing, right? And so when we can own those unique perspectives that only we can bring, we can actually see the talents in others without so much compare and despair, because now we're at the table as equals, okay? So the next place we want to go then is alignment. And this is what I always tell folks. This is the how of speaking up. So when I think about writing my book, there was just some unique perspectives that only I could offer based on my experience, my talents, etc. So those are the chapters that I wrote, the topics of the chapters. Then there's the alignment. This is the how of speaking up. So you can start to ask yourself, okay, when somebody is reading this email I'm going to write, when somebody is listening to this talk that I'm going to give, what is the energy that I want to create in that room? And I want you just to name 3 adjectives. Do I want it to create like creative, practical, yet trustworthy energy? Another way you can ask yourself this question is, what are 3 words that describe how I want that person to feel? And I deeply thought about that when I was writing the book, is when they're reading this, how do I want them to feel? When I stand up and give training talks, how do I want them to feel? And so then I'm going to choose stories. I'm going to craft a flow. I'm going to use words that hopefully are evoking how I want my audience to feel, that energy I want to bring into the room. And here's a little side benefit of that. It's really hard to focus on your own imposter syndrome and your own doubts when you're focused on someone else. Okay. It's really hard to do those 2 things at the same time. So we've got authenticity. We've got alignment. That's the how of speaking up. How am I going to say this? How am I going to write this? And I think you talk about in today's political environment, the how is really important, because as you ascend into leadership, whether it's corporate or as you ascend into leadership and it's political, you will be criticized. Plan on it. Count on it. You're going to make decisions not everybody agrees with. So you have to be proud of how you showed up in that campaign, in that talk, in that email that you sent, because that way when you endure the criticism, you're like, you know what, not everybody disagreed, but I felt good that I stood up in alignment with my values. So then the last circle is action. And so this is really the question of, based on what do I know for sure about me and my unique perspective and how I want people to feel, the energy I want to create with this, what is mine to say? What is not mine to say? And that question, what is not mine to say, was actually really helpful in writing the book, because there were some chapters where I'm like, this felt edgy writing it, but you know what? Number one, it's not going to evoke the energy I want the reader to have. And you know what? This really isn't mine to say. It's just business I thought I needed to write about. Same thing with like standing up and giving a talk. Like there's just some things you're like, no, this is not mine to say. So that can help give you some clarity on what is mine to say, what questions must I ask, what recommendations must I make that are both in alignment with my unique perspective and my values, the way that I want to show up in this world. And that can help folks provide a lot of clarity without feeling like they need to show up a certain way. Because the last thing I'll leave you with is so many folks get up and say, well, if you want to be a compelling speaker, you need to be this, this, and this. And I always say no. Like, that actually just creates more interference because, you know, you don't need to like find your voice in any of this. Like, you already have a voice. And this advocacy model really is just about helping you it really just helps you remove everything that's in the way of this voice that you already have by bringing out those unique qualities that only you can give. You don't need to be anybody else to have influence.
I think what keeps coming up for me is this idea of uniqueness. And I think that we are supposed to present ourselves in a specific way. And so there must be some other way to kind of reconnect ourselves, almost like plug ourselves back in and give ourselves the voice where I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where my brain didn't think as quickly as other people did in the same way. And I continuously just, I would berate myself of like, why didn't I think of that? That makes so much more sense. They were so much more strategic, and it almost felt like a continuous beatdown of myself, where part of it is like reconnecting of what is my authentic voice when I may not be contributing in the way that I wish I would have when I see other people contribute in that way. So how do we reconnect to what that looks like for us?
Mm-hmm. I'm an introvert. I know that probably surprises people, but like, I'm also the person that never thinks of anything. Like I think of everything I should have said, like about 9:30 at night when I'm like watching Friends reruns and I'm like, oh, damn it. Right. So here's some techniques that have helped me. Number one, just remember, and I heard you do it a little bit, like you cannot criticize yourself into more confidence here. So like if you're sitting in that meeting criticizing yourself constantly, oh my God, I can't speak up like her. Oh my God, because I did it all the time. I worked with and she still was one of my favorite corporate coworkers. She just had this ease about her that like she could just speak up and riff, and I'm like, I can't do that. But me criticizing myself wasn't helping me be more confident in that room. Right. It was just like, making my energy spiral downward. Anyways, so number one, stop criticizing yourself. You can't criticize yourself into more confidence. Number two, like I'm an introvert. And so one of the things that I had to learn was I can't just walk into a meeting not really kind of knowing what we're going to talk about. I had to prepare. And that doesn't mean that I spent hours like studying or everything. It was just like, okay, this is the meeting. This is the agenda. If I didn't know the agenda, lots of times I'd reach out and be like, hey, what's this meeting for? And what did help me was not necessarily thinking about all the comments I wanted to make, but what helped me was just thinking, what are 2 or 3 really important questions I need to ask in that meeting? Because remember, sometimes it's not always what you tell people, it's what you get people thinking about. And a great way to do that, to start conversation, is to ask smart questions. And the last thing I always tell folks as an introvert is just because the meeting's over doesn't mean the conversation's over. And, sometimes meetings are just places where conversations begin. So there is no harm and no foul in sending a note to someone the next day and saying, hey, Allison, you were saying in that meeting, and it really got me thinking, and I couldn't quit thinking about it last night. And here's kind of my idea. Here's some questions I have. Do you think we could take 5 minutes and continue this conversation at some point today? Right? It's like just because the meeting's over doesn't mean the moment has passed.
I love that. I was thinking about a distinction that you made about the concept of executive presence. The concept executive presence comes up a lot of how do you refine your executive presence? But you have a different spin on it where, at least from what I can tell, it feels very broad and not specific, and you kind of reposition it to be skillful behaviors. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about because this is really standing in our power, and really identifying what are the skillful behaviors we have that don't feel like we are forcing anything, right?
Exactly.
Because we're owning what we've got.
I have so many clients I'm hired a lot by organizations to coach. And sometimes the hiring leader will say, hey, this person needs to work on their executive presence. And I'm like, oh, internally, because it's such a broad term. It's a masculine term that was created by men for men when it was all men in the workplace. And so what I really get to folks is I will make them drill down. So I'll coach them a little bit and I'll say, okay, tell me what this individual does that communicates a lack of presence. And they're like, well, she just kind of, they kind of dance around the issue. And I'm like, what is one behavior that this person does in meetings that is annoying to people? And lots of times what I'll hear is, well, she interrupts folks. Great. We can work with that behavior. Sometimes they'll say, well, she's assertive. Okay, well, what's the behavior? Well,
Yeah.
what that means is she talks 45 minutes of a 55-minute meeting. Great. Like we can work with that behavior. And so number one, I really try to get folks down to what is the behavior that is creating disconnection, because executive presence is all about connection. So there's probably behavior. Maybe
Yeah.
it's interruption. Maybe it's over talking. Maybe they're not talking at all. Okay. Well, that's a behavior we can work with. But what I really get folks to move forward to is not executive presence, but something I call situational savviness. And I think so many women have been told, like, well, you need to tone down your talkativeness, your assertiveness, your bossiness, your directness. But what I often argue, and I have some stories in the book around this, is that actually it's those things that are probably the needed skills in the world. There's probably reasons, like, for instance, I think I've always been called too direct, but when I ran HR, my directness was an asset. But because I was direct, I was able to communicate hard news. Like, hey, our benefits are changing, or hey, this is changing. Hey, there's some performance things that just requires a level of directness at that level that had I not had it, I wouldn't have been effective at my job. And so, one of the things that I was always kind of trying to balance my directness with was like this politeness. Like I always just, because from a young age, like, Kelli, you're too blunt, you're too direct. So I was always trying to be overly polite. And so I would ask you, what have you always been called, if you don't mind me asking?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
A lot. I've been called a lot.
A lot. You're a lot. Okay. So, and I have so many women say that
I think
you
very
are a
bold.
lot.
I think bold. Yeah. I
Bold.
think
Okay.
I'm called bold and dynamic.
Okay. Okay. And so when you were called that, did you ever feel a little bit like self-conscious about that? Like, oh God, am I being too bold in this? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did that do to your energy?
Usually, and this has happened even in personal life. I remember when I was dating somebody. I wasn't dating somebody. I was like on the apps. This is like way before apps. It was like dating sites, before I had met my husband. And I remember I was talking to this guy and I was walking around Target and I was on the phone with this guy and he said, "You have a lot of energy." I mean, like a lot. Do you drink coffee? Like, cause you got a lot of energy. And I noticed myself getting more energetic. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I started to get, in my mind, more obnoxious because it was like calling out something that, obviously he wasn't somebody I should have spent time with, but it was so annoying. And I guess the same concept could be here, is that it ends up actually turning it up or you try and stifle it down.
Yes. Okay. So my question for you is what is that skill maybe that you try to then cultivate in your life to balance your boldness?
Oh, well, I think because I am so, I'm highly measured in the way that I speak, because I feel like my natural instinct is just to blurt things out that could come across as offensive or talking over people. So I have worked really, really hard to be a better listener and like shut up and listen.
I love this. Okay. So if you're listening, this is what I want you to do. Like, I was always called too direct. You were called too bold. And so we developed these counter strategies. Politeness, you developed like a measuredness. We get to put this on another little chart. I want you just to draw a 4-box. Okay. We've got Venn diagrams. We've got 4 boxes going on. So at the top left of your 4-box, you're just going to put what you've always been called. For me, it would be direct. For Allison, it would be bold. And then on the bottom right of your 4-box, you're going to just put what is that quality that you've been trying to cultivate to kind of counterbalance that. For me, it was politeness. For Allison, it might be measuredness. And then what I really encourage my clients to do is to say, you know what, we are not going to drop these qualities that are not only natural to us, but that we've also been working so hard to cultivate because they belong too. So you instead, let's ask ourselves, what situations call for a high level of boldness and a low level of measuredness? There's probably some situations in your life where you're like, we're going to be bold and not measured, and it's going to be good for us. But if you go to the other end, what situations call for a high level of measuredness and a low level of boldness? And then you can just fill in the rest, right? Like, so what requires high level of bold and measured, right? Where do I need to be bold and measured? And I'm sure there's some situations. And it really just kind of brings to life to say, you know what, all of these qualities that I have belong, and all of this work that I've done belong. And I can just be more savvy about when I use these qualities in the right situations so that I can make the influence and the impact that I want to make in a way that feels meaningful to me.
Well, this brings up another question because a lot of people who listen to this podcast are really successful in their lives and they may be contemplating a big change. And that big change may be, do I work for another company? Do I quit altogether and burn everything down and trying to, become a yoga instructor on Bora Bora, whatever, like I think we all have fantasies of that. How do you know when to quit? So as you're doing that, you seem to have a lot of values-based conversations. How do you know when to quit?
Well, it's not that easy. I always am telling folks, you know what, your body always knows. So I'll just tell you a story of how I knew it was time to quit. So, and I want to just bracket this with, to be able to quit, it requires a certain level of privilege. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't want to sit here and tell this story and be like, oh, you can just quit if you want, because like, let's be real. The reason why I could quit before I tell this story is like, I was living in my own house and I met he's my second husband. We were both living independently. We merged houses. I had money from a house sale. We have dual income. Before I met him, when I was a single income raising my daughter, I would not have had such luxury. So when I say this story, I just want to recognize that the choice to quit also comes with a lot of privilege, cushion, and some financial means. Okay, so given that, I was working in corporate America, and the role that I was working for actually another author and a leadership consultant. I was traveling all over the country doing leadership development training, and I was crispy with burnout. Like, because my job before that, I had traveled as well. And I was recently married. My daughter was 13 at the time. So she's starting to get into stuff, right? And I want to go to the things, but I'm like sitting in O'Hare, like on a layover, and I'm like, And so it kind of just like occurred to me because I kept fantasizing about like having a maternity leave. And like my husband and I were going through infertility and I wasn't getting pregnant. And I remember one Sunday I was just bawling. And he's like, Kelly's like, why is getting pregnant this like so urgent, And I was like, I just need time away. And that was kind of like my aha. I'm like, I need to get off the road. Like I need to stop. Or I need to get off of this job. So like just my body there was the first kind of aha that this is not working. So then I had two paths to take. I could go off on my own, which felt super scary because like I would literally be starting from scratch. I knew I would kind of want to do coaching and training, but like I didn't even know where I would get $1. Or I could go find another job kind of in the training world that didn't travel. And I just remember like going to the job interviews of this job I was looking at, and like my stomach just felt heavy and I almost just felt dread. And I remember every time I would go in, I just would get this familiar knot in my stomach that I used to ignore for so long, thinking that I could like talk myself out of it. But every time I thought about starting my own business, like I literally couldn't help myself. Like I was like building a website and I was thinking of all the blogs I was going to write. It's literally like my body couldn't help itself. I was drawn to it like a magnet.
Yeah.
And so, I think sometimes, yes, I had the means to be able to quit my job because I had some other financial things. But I think where I always tell folks is, trust your body. Your body always knows. Like trust and ask yourself, I kind of run people through kind of a head, heart, gut exercise. Like, let's just start with our heads. Like, what are the data and the facts? What are your skills? What's happening with your job right now? With mine, I was traveling way too much. What jobs can I do, right? That's just that good data analysis. But then we also have to kind of go in and do like a little heart check. Like, what sort of role aligns with my values? Like, well, my values are like love, respect, creativity, learning, and family. And I'm like, a job traveling is just not in alignment with my family values. So like, what lifestyle aligns with my values and the type of life that I want to create for myself and my family? And then the last question is just really checking in with your gut is like, what feels like peace and what feels like dread? And every time I went to those interviews, like I just felt that heaviness of dread. And I ask my clients a lot, I'm like, I want you to imagine making this choice. Will you feel resentful or will you feel peaceful? And it doesn't mean it's not scary. Don't get me wrong. I was scared out of my living mind starting my own business, but it felt like that scare-sighted feeling, not that gross, heavy, I'm scared I'm going to dread and resent it feeling, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think, I was thinking about the evaluation of, are you in the right spot? And some of it might be where you've worked so hard to get to this spot. And maybe there are adjustments that need to be made. Maybe it looks like you really kind of rooting down into the confidence piece of it. And I heard you talk about like a 4-phased approach. Do you want me to remind you what it is? One is
I've got a couple of them. I'm like, crap, which one
I
is
know
it?
you have a lot. Aligning with your values. And I thought like what I loved is you talked about checking in with your energy levels. You know, is it draining? Is it not draining? Am I using my skills and talents?
Yes, the career alignment check. So it's a 5 question.
Career alignment check. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a great question. That's where I start with folks all the time. It's like, let's just do a career alignment check. So question number 1 is just this is, do my values align with the company's values? And this is not the values that they have posted on their website. That's marketing language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Values are, do I agree with the way the company makes decisions and where they spend their money? So for me, my big aha moment was I led training teams. And so one of my values was learning, and my company had no learning budget. Like where companies spend their money will tell you what they value. So you can ask yourself, do my values and the company's values align? Because if they align, we can get through some stuff. If they don't align, it's going to be a lot harder. The second question is, what's my like level of energy at the end of every day? Like, am I kind of that happy tired because I had a really good challenge and I felt good about what I accomplished? Or is it that like, oh my gosh, I pushed a rock uphill and I want to go home and die, like energy? The third question is do I have the opportunity to use my skills and talents every single day? And, or is there an opportunity for me somewhere else in this company to use my best skills and talents? The next question is this career ultimately moving me closer to my career purpose and goals? Like, is it going to allow me to, move closer to that thing that, I ultimately want to become? And so just by running through those questions can really just give you some clues on like, is this the right opportunity for me to stay or to go?
I think the power in those questions is that there are other options. And I think we can kind of back ourselves into a corner thinking this is it. I've worked so hard for this. I need to be grateful. I need to just suck it up. But it is sucking you out of life. And I think, I'm curious as to you doing this work. What are you seeing out in the marketplace that can give us hope for really implementing this?
Well, what I can give you as hope is I see women using it all the time. But let me give you some concrete examples. So somebody that I admire is Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
And this might feel far out for you, but let me just kind of bring this back. One of the things that I admire about Reese is she started as an actress inside the system. And one of the things she realized is number one, she loves stories. She loves reading books. And she started to realize that the stories that were being told about women in the media and in the movies were all from a male perspective, written by men, starring men. And so she recognized that, maybe if I start telling women's stories and, tell things from the perspective of a woman, like it will work. Well, we know that she sold her company. I do not remember. Oh, it was Hello Sunshine for like $1 billion, you know? Another person that I think of is Jamie Kern-Lima. Jamie Kern-Lima is the founder of IT Cosmetics. And, she founded IT Cosmetics on her living room floor because she had rosacea and she kept trying to cover it up. And one of the things that annoyed her was she's like, the beauty industry is broken. Like they're using all these models that have flawless skin. Like they don't need my product. She's like, real women who look like real people need my product.
Yeah.
And as she was running on her last dime, venture capitalists kept trying to give her money, but they said, we're only going to give you money if you use traditional beauty industry models. And she's like, no. That is hurting women. It's hurting the industry. It's what's wrong with the industry. And she refused. And so if you all know the story, like she ended up going on QVC using herself, even though QVC didn't want her to. And when they showed how the makeup worked, like she sold out in minutes. And she was the largest beauty brand on QVC. And then she ultimately sold IT Cosmetics to L'Oreal for $1 billion. Again, that billion mark. But what she showed was that standing by her values, pursuing her own way, she left a career in media. She ultimately transformed the beauty industry. And now we have companies like Athleta and Dove and like all these other companies that use real women's bodies. And she's totally changed the narrative. And so those are big examples. But remember, like the small examples of little things that you can do every day is, so many women, when I work with them and we kind of talk about that career alignment check, they start to recognize, what, I bet if I can just have the courage to have one conversation inside my organization about what I love to do, perhaps I can bring my job a little bit more in alignment with the things that I love to do simply by having a conversation with my leader. And sometimes it's those small conversations I see happen all of the time that just transforms a woman's whole life. because they go to work every day and they're like, I literally just told my boss what I love and I got more of it. And now I feel better every day from 8 to 5. It can be the tiniest transformation like that.
That is freaking awesome, Kelli. How do people get more from you? You've got a book, a TEDx or TED?
Yep, TEDx.
A TED Talk coming. And you do coaching and workshops and keynotes. You do it all. How do people work with you or connect with you?
The best place to go is just to come to my website. I'm at kellyraythompson.com. I'm Kelli with an I, R-A-E. And if you go to the free section, there's some free stuff you can download. And of course, that's where you can find where to go to buy my book. Although it's on the Amazon, you can buy it in every format. If you enjoy the sound of my voice, you can listen to it. So otherwise, I love to hang out on Instagram at /Kelli Ray Thompson or on LinkedIn. You can come find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kelli. I love the work that you're doing, and it is so important and groundbreaking. And I can't wait to kick more doors down as we do in women and balance the scales a little more.
I agree. Thank you.